you've got this scratch on your forehead. So am I to interpret from this that you've had some you've had some people coming over to your place since the last episode and expressing their frustration?
Well, I made a joke that I'm auditioning for the next Harry Potter movie
Oh,
if they ever make
okay.
another.
Nice, nice, nice.
But no, yeah, I was playing basketball just yesterday with cousins. One of my cousins from California, whenever he visits, we always play ball. And yeah, I got a pretty nasty scratch right here. So,
There
I was thinking of hiding it with some makeup or whatever, but
you go.
you know, it's all good.
Battle
Let's keep it
scars.
raw, keep it
That's
natural,
that's it.
authentic.
That's what I like. Battle scars are good. All right, let's go. Where are we starting today?
All right. Well, um, we ended off the last conversation by talking a little bit about some of the verses in the Quran in which it seems uh, to indicate that Allah is using a label, right? Capital I Islam or capital M Muslim. And I wanted to look at a few of those examples that we haven't covered yet. In fact, perhaps the strongest examples that some would use to counter what you're saying about not using labels. So let's look at the two examples in Surah Ali Imran, the third chapter of the Quran. One in which Allah says, وَمَن يَبْتَغِي غَيْرَ الْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا فَلَن يُقْبَلَ مِنْهُ. That whoever, I'm sure you can translate it better, but whoever chooses or goes with anything other than Islam, al-Islam, فَلَن يُقْبَلَ مِنْهُ, then it will not be accepted from them. And then the other one is إِنَّ الدِّينَ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ al-Islam, that indeed the deen, or you could say the religion, the way of life, uh, according to God, is al-Islam. And it's interesting that ad-deen is used and al-Islam is used in the proper tense with the alif lam. I don't know if that bears any significance, but yeah, if we could look at each of those verses one by one.
Okay. Fine. So before we get into that, then the word deen is obviously really important here. To before we even get to how to look at the al-Islam part. So you obviously suggested various possible translations for deen, yeah, amongst which was religion, and then you said way of life. And I mean, can you see how the way in which we will approach this depends very much then on how we understand the idea of deen?
Yeah, I assume you would say that if we translate it as a religion, essentially religion probably is not the best translation of deen because then, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know that point that we made last time around the fact that at the time of the revelation itself, in the verses across the board, there is no reference to any other uh, religion using the kind of named terminology that we use today. So we cannot find, obviously at that time, what would be relevant is Judaism or Christianity. And I would even say then that the shirk that we discussed that is mostly contrasted with Islam is clearly a kind of a lowercase p polytheism, or actually it's more accurately henotheism. Anyway, I don't want to get into that, but the point being it's not monotheism, but it's like shirk, right? So we don't interpret the main contrasted term as a religion, right? Also, we noted that there is no plural of deen in the revelation. There's
Mm,
no adyan.
mm,
So again, today we talk about religion, a religion, and religions, a religion amongst religions, whereas there's no deen amongst adyan in the
mm.
revelation. A really famous, a well-known verse for, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think it will possibly the only, but certainly I think the last in the kind of compiled order of the revelation. If we look at the 98th chapter, Al-Bayyinah, um, let's look at this verse. وَمَا أُمِرُوا إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ
Mm,
حُنَفَاءَ وَيُقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَيُؤْتُوا الزَّكَاةَ وَذَلِكَ دِينُ الْقَيِّمَةِ. Right?
mm,
So this is interesting. So وَمَا أُمِرُوا, so they are not commanded, إِلَّا, except لِيَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ, to serve or worship God, مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ, purifying for him the deen. Now that's a really good example here, because if I say to you, or in contemporary speak, I'm not sure that you will have ever heard, right? And I certainly have not heard the idea that, or like, as in it's awkward, certainly in English to say, I'm purifying my religion for God.
mm,
But that's exactly what that thing is saying. That's that, like, if you were to
mm,
translate, yeah, mukhlisin, the one who does ikhlas of something to purify. The deen is the object. So I'm purified. So there's something, the deen is something that I can purify for God. So what is
mm,
that then? Right? To say
mm,
religion, it doesn't strike correct. Like it doesn't, it's very, and you will see that translation, interestingly. So obviously, if you look at a number of different translations, and obviously something like Quran.com allows you to look at, and certainly encourage anyone who's engaging with this to go and then look at all the various, you can set up 8, 10, whatever it is, translations simultaneously. You can see the comparison. Also, there's a useful, really useful website, corpus.quran.com, which is like a etymological kind of breakdown of all of the words, etc. But it also gives multiple translations. Okay. Anyway, the point being is that you will sometimes see this translation purifying their religion for God, but it's just a bit awkward. Anyway, then it says hunafa, and we said hanif here, the plural hunafa. Again, it's another word that indicates this kind of purity, devotion, leaning towards, right? But as hunafa, the plural hanif. And then وَيُقِيمُ الصَّلَاةَ وَيُؤْتُوا الزَّكَاةَ, to establish the salah, the prayer, the connection, يُؤْتُوا الزَّكَاةَ, to give the zakah, this essentially wealth purifying or self purifying through wealth action. And these are everything's hard to translate, right? Anyway, salah, zakah. وَذَلِكَ دِينُ الْقَيِّمَةِ, right? That's the upright deen. Okay. So it's really interesting that it's saying, so the deen, like here, ذَلِكَ دِينُ الْقَيِّمَةِ is kind of to capture the whole thing, right, that was just mentioned, within which you have the purification of the deen, but then you have deen is also the whole thing. So this is just one. Okay, there's so many now. In fact, just now off the top of my head, it's coming to me that the in Surah Zumar, أَلَا لِلَّهِ الدِّينُ الْخَالِص, yeah, is the ad-deen al-khalis not for God, right? Ala lillahi din al-khalis, like it's asking a question, right? It's a rhetorical question. Is that not the case that the ad-deen al-khalis, the pure religion, is again? So look, I just want to say all this because this is important. Now we come back to this thing, okay? And I'm going to suggest that deen. Now this is an interesting way, actually, now to link deen to religion and also religion to its own etymology in, say, English, Latin, etc. So deen, as is well known, is often said. All right. First of all, in the Revelation itself, you have famously the most common example of deen that we all know is Malik Yawmiddin. What's that? The Day of Judgment. In explaining this, so here now deen, it means judgment, something completely, like it's no one's saying the day of religion. Now, obviously, individual words can have multiple meanings, but the fact that they have the same root and whatever means that you can have, like different, you can have different meanings or translations, but there's something that's likely to be related, which is the important point here. Now, I'm sure you've heard it said, or mentioned sometimes, especially in the explanation of Malik Yawmiddin, the idea of dain. Dain is a debt, right? And the word dain is used as well in relation to debt, specifically in various other verses. One thing that debt does is bind you. Creditor and debtor are bound, okay, in an exchange, okay? Something is owed, right? So now you can see where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
Malik Yawmiddin is when, like, one connection could be when all scores are settled, literally. That we all understand that's the point of it, right? You get closure on all matters, all the things that have happened, and then there's a kind of a closure where there's fairness and justice. Obviously, we, people hope for a merciful, compassionate judgment, but there's still judgment, right?
Yeah.
That's why we call it Day of Judgment. Why this is so interesting, actually, is because the etymology of religion, one of the main explanations, and why people now, meaning even, for want of a better phrase, Western critics of the concept of religion, and who identify the same thing that I'm saying, and frankly, I've got that from them and others, right? That they say, look, we don't want religion nowadays, we want religio. The original word religio comes from a Latin religare, right? Which means to bind. So deen is a way of binding yourself to yourself, binding yourself to each other, binding yourself to reality, right? To God and reality. It is an orienting mechanism. Now, if I say purify your orientation, it starts to, again, it's a little bit awkward still in English, like for certainly day-to-day English, right? Probably all my English is awkward in these discussions of day-to-day English. There's a street version of me. I mean, maybe that will come in episode 150, right? Anyway, but the point being is that, right? So but that's now really super powerful. I find it really incredibly powerful. This idea that because remember we've talked about this constant alignment issue, and I really like this idea of alignment for ibadah, right? It's kind of bring yourself into alignment, and then you look at the connection, you look at what you're doing, the money, salah, zakat, when you can really bring all these things very deeply into synthesis and coherence with this notion of constantly realigning yourself, to each other, right? And then in the ultimate relationship. Okay, and these all are synced up and coherent. Okay, inna dina inda Allah al-Islam. Okay, the right orientation as far as God is concerned is surrender. Surrender, let go, right? That's what it's saying. It's an attitude again. I think I did say last time that, and I'm perfectly cognizant, and I've had to think through, obviously, these verses and concepts myself to try to understand them better. But if you think about it this way, it's like I want to say all of the boxes are ticked from the point of view of the considerations that we would have in terms of what we're trying to reflect here. Accurate to the words themselves when you look at the same words as they're used elsewhere. Universal, because this is a universal message. So as far as, at least in the English language, this is a reflection of something that's universal and accessible to anyone, right? And it's existential, not conventional, right? It's speaking at the existential level, not at the conventional level of terms and labels, but at the existential level of orientation and what I can start to do with my life. It binds with everything that we, pun intended, binds with what we said last time around the similar. Like now you can't. It's not that now to adopt. You don't adopt the deen of Islam, nor do you become Muslim. You simply surrender, just surrender, and it's verbal.
Yeah.
Right, and then the surrendering is adverbial. Now I want to bring up that particular reference, which is 3:19. Okay, so chapter 3, verse 19. It's so interesting. So in the Abdul Halim translation, Oxford World Classics is obviously one of the very famous translations now. So it's in he translates it like this: true religion, and he says capital T for the beginning of sentence, right? But I wonder if actually, even if it was in the middle of the sentence in this case, he would like even keep the T capital. But religion is capital here, which he wouldn't normally do that in his translation. So he says true religion, capital T, capital R, in God's eyes, عند Allah, like as far as God is concerned, so to speak. And then he says is Islam, and his Islam is lowercase I, and then in square brackets he has devotion to him alone. So you can see in this kind of he's wrestling with this, clearly wrestling with this, right? And because elsewhere in his translations, if I'm not, well, certainly with Muslim, he will have capital M Muslim. I think.
Yeah.
Well, to be honest, in the Abdul Halim translation, mostly he will translate, not transliterate. He will usually use devoted, which is my favorite translation for the word. Islam as in devotion or devoting, I know in the noun it's not as in the when it's describing the Muslim devotee is a bit it sounds a bit lame. Okay, but anyway, you can see he's wrestling with this. Okay, so now and then he says, okay, just briefly, I'll just say in the translation the rest of the verse. Those who were given this al-kitab, the scripture, disagreed out of rivalry only after they had been given knowledge. So again, this criticism of dividing up after knowledge comes, which is really important because I thought about it since we spoke last about the way in which that's chastised actually. And there's again, it is in Al Imran as well, right? Or let's maybe, if you remind me, maybe just make a note and we can come back to that one because that's really about division. That's really important. So if anyone denies the ayatillah, God's signs, messages, revelations, God is swift to take account. Okay, now this next verse is really key to understand the previous verse, because in the next verse, so this is now verse number 20, you have 3 usages of the verb aslama. Right? So look, so it's continuing. So now if they argue with you, meaning addressing the Prophet, peace be upon him, فَقُلْ, what should you say? أَسْلَمْتُ وَجْهِي لِلَّهِ وَمَنِ اتَّبَعَنِ. I have submitted my face, like literally submitted my face, surrendered my face, which is to say devoted myself fully. And the face is used as like, it connects with obviously the idea in the salah itself, the prostration, the idea that how do you know, like as in the first, like where's your first reading of someone's kind of emotion in relation to this? You see the surrender on the face first, before you see it anywhere else. Okay. We made this kind of sort of joking connection kind of last time, but there's a lot to be said for this kind of thing, that even in our most loving, intimate relationships, okay, where do you see the devotion in each other first? Right? Somewhere here. Okay. So I've developed, so I've done that. So if you look at the verbal, see how the verbal response. So what's he supposed to say? Like to reflect the fact that the deen is al-Islam, he's saying aslam to wajhi. I haven't Islammed my face. I haven't Muslimed my face, capital I, capital N. Like it just completely breaks down at this point. But what you can say is, you're right. So if you, to make it consistent, Here, the right orientation as far as God is concerned is true surrender, right? Here, so say to them, I have truly devoted myself, I've truly surrendered, right? Myself and those who follow me. Then say to those who were given the scripture, as well as those without one, aslamtum, are you going to now devote yourself? Same, now so asking them a question. فَإِنْ أَسْلَمُوا, so if they do devote themselves, فَقَدْ اهْتَدَوْا, they have found guidance, or they will be guided, right?
Mhm.
So 3 times, right? I've submitted myself. Are you going to submit yourself? If they do submit themselves, or devote, yeah?
Mhm.
And if they
Right.
turn away, then all that you can do is convey the message, right? Very commonly repeated, and God, sees, all his servants. I
Mm.
rest my case.
Yeah, no, that was incredible. I've actually obviously never heard that translation. I love the translation orientation for being. It makes complete sense. And then the next verse to give that context also, I think definitely you have a strong case there. I
By the
actually,
way,
off the
just
top of
one
my head,
really,
can you?
sorry, forgive me, but one really interesting thing, isn't it also like in popular culture, don't we always hear people say Islam's not a religion, it's a way of life? Even if they don't
Mm,
understand anything of what we have been discussing or think about, but
right.
like there's something intuitive. Religion,
Yeah.
I'm not quite comfortable with that. Way of life, which again is an orientation. It's an approach. It's an
Hmm.
attitude,
Yeah.
right? It connects back to
Right.
what we said right at the beginning in the, about the wow factor. It's an orientation. I'm
Yeah.
committing to an approach, a process, a
Hmm.
way of being,
Yeah.
which may not be true
Right.
tomorrow, which, I might forget that and then have to come back, and then it's flux, it's in flux, and it's in flow. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. And just to clarify, you mentioned the um epistemology, if that's the right word, of the word. Is it etymology? Sorry.
Etymology. Yeah.
Of the word etymology of the word religion.
Yeah.
Was the purpose of bringing that up to show that essentially the root of it has the same meaning?
Right. Exactly. But that's exactly. So
Okay.
it's
But
so
that's
interesting
not
because
understood though when you say religion.
not anymore, but that it used to be.
Right.
As with a lot
Gotcha.
of these
I
things,
see.
there's lots of these, I was thinking today actually about the fact that, there's so many of these words that even we use in English, they have very profound
Mhm.
meanings, right? So and if you break them down and then you look at the original thing and then what it's actually saying, I'll give you a really good example,
Right.
okay? So I learned this, a couple of months ago. Atonement, to
Mm,
atone for oneself. Okay,
mm,
look, break down atonement, at one-ment. I become at one. That's
hmm.
banging, man. I love
Interesting.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like
Yeah.
to atone for my
Hmm.
sins, right?
Yeah.
Is and to atone in front of God is to become one again. Is literally tawbah,
Yeah.
taba, yeah? To turn back while you're becoming one with the path, right, to the divine
Hmm.
once again. Uh, to remind, I'm going to remind you.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I
Rejig
like
that,
that. Yeah.
rejig your internal architecture. Yeah.
Okay. Now, also a follow-up question to what you said, just to again just make sure everything is clear. You mentioned that Allah is using the word deen in the singular. He never uses it in the plural in the Quran. And so therefore, what is uh I guess how would, according to the Quran at least, how would you then describe those who follow other things? So like, you know, Nasara, Yahud, even As-Sabi'in, right? Nasara, etc. So like, what are those things then exactly, if they're not other quote unquote religions?
Well, we can describe them as different orientations, right? The thing is, look, okay, one thing we have to appreciate is when we're looking at Quranic terminology, yeah, I think that the first thing we have to do is really understand them in the context of that time,
Mm,
right? I can't remember if I mentioned last time, but nowadays things have become more complex in some
mm,
meaning in terms of societies, right?
yeah.
There are whole groups that are not referred to explicitly. Why? Because they just weren't part of that milieu at the time. There are types of people who have characteristics of different things,
Mm,
right? Whereas in the Revelation, it's very clear. For those who don't know, I've been running this Club Revelation, like hosting this Quran program for, it's like 5 years now, right? 2 years thematically, 3 years systematically, and there's another 3 years scheduled, right, to go through the whole of the Revelation. One of the things that I was going to say outstanding in the sense that it stands out, right? There's another one, right? The one thing that really stands out from the messages is that you can really clearly see. both as far as the idea of Iman is concerned, and as far as the shirk, kufr, etc., nifaq, etc., that it's not just about, again, what's verbalized, right, or committed to in print, like in sort of principle, but what's manifested. Yeah, what goes along with that. That's why you have, right? So that's why you have true believers do all of these things, right? There's Iman in one really basic sense. I think there's a weak case to be made for it Quranically, right? About just an affirmation of something. But you can see constant references to the fact that what's true faith, right? All of these things. So similarly, you then have like mushrikun, right? There is absolutely nothing at all that's said positively about the actions of the mushrikun in Revelation. Whereas today, you can have someone that you might say doctrinally, okay, is a mushrik, okay, but there might be one of the nicest people you know. They're not aggressors. They're not doing the other things that are mentioned, right, in the Revelation, in terms of mocking, in terms of, mocking, jeering, causing harm, backbiting, all of these kinds of qualities, not caring about the poor, right? Okay, that's a good one, right? So another short chapter that a lot of people will be familiar with. Just to give this as an example. أَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي يُكَذِّبُ بِالدِّينِ. Okay, so the one who denies ad-deen. أَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي يُكَذِّبُ بِالدِّينِ فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي يَدُعُ الْيَتِيمِ. That's so interesting. Straight up, what is the definition of someone who denies the deen? Someone who repels the orphan. Now, what if there is somebody who at that time, I mean, it seems to almost suggest that the one who does do takdhib or denial of the deen can't be someone who does look after an orphan. It almost seems to suggest that, right? Because if you do look after an orphan now, that's like, well, that's an aspect of yukadhibu bidin that, like, literally, like, definitionally, someo's just not, that they don't meet that standard. So do you see what I mean? So there's something like a really active kind of denial, or an aggression, and then that carries on. They don't encourage one another to feed the needy. And what about the billions and billions and billions of charity that's given year in, year out by people of all persuasions, whatever, right? Who clearly care at some level, at some level, right? فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ. Then so interesting, right? Now it's actually criticizing those who pray, الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنْ صَلَاتِهِمْ سَاهُونَ, who are heedless with regards to their salah, their connection, their prayer. الَّذِينَ هُمْ يُرَاءُونَ, they only do it to be seen of people. It's not actually about orienting and connecting, but it's just to sort of, right? Which is fun, well, not so funny because it's a very serious verse, but it's kind of related to what we've discussed in the sense that going along with the herd mentality, with the group, with the identity of the group, and just to do the thing to show that you're part of the group is massively being slammed here, right? الَّذِينَ يُرَاءُونَ, and what is it? وَيَمْنَعُونَ الْمَاعُونَ. Right? يَمْنَعُونَ الْمَاعُونَ is, I'm not even going to hold the door for you, right? I'm just not going to hold your bags if you need help. I'm not going to, I really don't give a damn, Like, it's that level. There's a level of... And look how this is all nested. Look how that short chapter, which finishes with, with the verse I gave, starts with behavioral things, ends with behavioral, and salah is it. So it's like nested. So these things are all kind of connected, in a way. So what I'm trying to say is that, again, it just gives another sense of that deen. You said, what about all these other ways, right? I'm just saying yes, I was saying that these groups, I think at the time, broadly speaking, groups were much more, the lines were thicker, it seems. In reality, like on the ground, the lines were thicker, And every prophetic story in the Revelation seems to suggest a unified culture and then a prophetic disturbance or interruption that comes to kind of, right? It makes complete sense that when that happens, when there's a challenge, lines are drawn, right? And you see that phenomenon literally in relationships, individually, nationally, internationally, whatever, right? When challenge comes, oftentimes they say, oh, one good thing about a group facing a crisis is that the group bonds come tight. I think this thing's a lot more fluid now. So I'm just saying, in the first instance, let's look at those as a reflection of those groups. And as I mentioned last time, the Yahud and Nasara is actually quite, like, these are rare usages, like in the Revelation, to describe these people. Mostly Utul Kitab, Ahlul Kitab, given the scripture, people of the scripture, people of the book, etc. And interesting, just as a parallel, I mean, there are many scholars in the history of India who regarded Hindus as Ahlul Kitab, like, and that would be kind of very surprising to people because, well, aren't they mushrikun straight, right? But they were looking at the situation, they were thinking, okay, they were trying to look at the Quranic kind of descriptions of who's who, looking at this situation, and again, I'm not positing these things as necessarily like the verdict on everything, but I'm just saying it's complex, right? And it's fluid. And so
Yeah.
I just think we're better off in these states type things, which seems to be the dominant way of describing like people,
Mm,
state-based, right? Of course. Look, if states are continuously manifested in some way, someone in a sense is becoming encrusted into a kind of quote unquote identity. But even then, it still doesn't require the capitalized terms to lay onto it and then forever to see that person through that frame, or for
mm.
them to see themselves through that frame, because as we know, you can have 180-degree turns as well.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. One interesting thing you mentioned is that in the Quran, it seems that Allah never mentions, just to make sure I understood correctly, that Allah doesn't talk about the good actions of the mushrikun. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, like for example, I reflected recently, you never have inna ladina kafaru wa amilu salihat,
Right, 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 right.
right?
Yeah.
You
So,
have believers who mess up, but the idea
yeah,
that you are in a total active denial, right? Like, well, the way we
yeah.
understand kufr, right, which is just a doctrinal difference, right? I'm going to suggest that kufr is something very hard and active too, in the
Yeah, yeah,
revelation. So I'm just giving it that
yeah.
as an example. But whereas
So,
nowadays, there's
yeah,
so
so
many
would
people
it,
who do good deeds, right, who are not. Yeah.
well, I mean, so wouldn't that actually counter what you're saying? Because, um, I'm sure back then, any kafir or any mushrik, however you want to translate those, would have been doing good deeds in some sense. They're not literally doing sinning and bad every single second of every moment of their lives, right? So, wouldn't it suggest that any action is essentially not worthwhile? It doesn't mean much or anything because their belief is incorrect. So you're saying that it's, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, those who believe, who have true belief or who believe or claim to believe, and they do good deeds, right? This again goes back to the whole faith and good works. So if wouldn't what you said suggest that, okay, it's almost like implying, hey, their foundation is not even correct. The belief, just the basic belief is not even correct. Therefore, anything they do isn't worthwhile. And actually relates to one of the verses I wanted to discuss today, which has to do with shirk, right? Because we've been talking about Islam, Muslim, Deen,
Yeah. Yeah.
but one of the verses I wanted to talk about today was shirk.
Mm.
So a couple of examples, because again, we talked in the previous conversation about this whole, um, these labels, right?
Mm.
And one of the labels is, of course, one who associates partners with God, right? And so
Mm.
Allah says, "Inna Allah la yaghfiru an yushraka bihi wa yaghfiru ma duna dhalika liman yasha." That God does not forgive
Yeah.
one who associates partners, right?
Mm.
Uh, what are you laughing about? I don't know if I'm saying
No,
something
no,
funny.
because it's no. I know it's a heavy verse, but it's no, no.
Yeah,
Just
yeah, yeah.
I've thought about that verse so much. That's why it's just you're coming
Okay,
back. You reminded me. Yeah.
okay, okay. So let me just reference. Yeah, so God does not forgive
Yeah.
association with Him or associating partners with Him.
Yeah.
But God forgives anything other than that or lower than that or lesser than that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's also another verse. Well, actually, that's the one regarding shirk. From what I get from that is, well, that's because their belief is so corrupted that anything
Ah.
good that they do doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
And I don't think, again, there's a distinction between those who are mushrikun today and who do good
Yeah.
and back then, because they were, of course, they weren't just doing
Yeah.
all bad, right? And
Yeah.
then how does that, and then
So
related to this verse, yeah.
yeah. So are you saying it's your opinion that there is absolutely no meaning or worth or existential benefit of the good that people do unless they have essentially said La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah?
Well, yeah, so this goes back to what you said, what we were discussing last time, which is that you basically seem to have stated that stated belief or doctrinal belief almost has no weight on its own unless backed up by practice or action, right?
Yeah.
But what I actually disagree with that based on what I see in the Quran
Yeah.
and even logically speaking, right? So anyway, yeah.
No, but so what's the answer to my question then? Which is, are you saying that, in your opinion, there is absolutely no weight, merit, benefit whatsoever to the deeds of somebody who doesn't meet some minimum criteria of stated faith, like just today, historically, in the future, like it just doesn't mean anything. Like it's all happening, right? People are giving charity, they're making great sacrifice and looking after family members, their acts of kindness, goodness, selflessness. It's all just basically nothing.
Well, um, it depends on what you mean by that. I would say that
Well, basically, I'm saying
in
it has no existential weight, meaning it has is no ultimate merit, no ultimate meaning. Essentially, it was just
I
like
think it
it
depends.
just means nothing.
Yeah, I think it depends on, again, the belief and the intention behind the actions.
No, but like
So
some
if
look,
some,
okay, some random Chinese peasant, okay, he's just walking
yeah,
around, all right, and he's just grown up, lived in his village, which has been basically unaffected by the outside world, even in China, let alone the rest of the world, for God knows how long, okay, and a noble person, a righteous person, a good person, a wise person, fine, made mistakes here and there, but ultimately everybody around that person would say this is an upright, decent individual, yeah, and
Mhm.
we're saying, okay, yeah, that's good in this life, but really, at the end of the day, since there was no right belief there, yeah, he believed in reincarnation. Essentially, the life and the merit of this person's life basically just
Mm.
means nothing. That's the implication, essentially,
Well,
of what we're saying, or what you're saying.
yeah. So yeah, sorry, I know we're going back and forth on this before we get deeper into this, but I think that you can't make a clear cut statement, right? Because there's even just the example that you gave, there
Mm.
are multiple variables that need to be taken into consideration, which of course God would take into consideration in terms of to what extent this person had exposure to what we would say is the truth or belief in one God
Yeah,
or
yeah,
pure monotheism, right?
yeah. So a lot of this depends on on all our starting like presuppositions. Okay, so a few things I'll point out, just things that have come to mind in what we've said here. Number one, we've said inna ladina amanu wa amilu salihat, right? X, Y, Z. Those who have faith and do righteous deeds. I'm going to suggest that you're assuming that inna ladina amanu there means those people who have said la ilaha Muhammad Rasulullah. Like that's the definition of it. I don't see any reason as to why we should conclude that that's what that means, right? Like for example, if he said inna ladina taqaw, people of taqwa, right? People of
Mm,
like we would say, yeah, that's a quality they need to manifest. We wouldn't
mm,
say that's something verbal. We'd say that's a quality they need to manifest. In fact, any other verb you would put in there, like a verb in from Revelation to describe something positive or meritorious in any way, we would associate that with something that is manifested, right? Is intended,
well,
but
just to
also
give you one
manifested.
example, yeah. So, I mean, just one example that comes to mind. I mean, of
Yeah.
course, Allah is, and this is another, again, point we want to discuss. It's all kind of coming together.
Mm.
But in the Quran, Allah clearly defines Iman and who a mu'min is. So, obviously, the last verse of Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah says, Aman al-Rasulu, the messenger has believed, unzila ilayhi min rabbihi wal mu'minun, what was revealed to him, and uh, from his Lord, and the believers, kullun, all of them, amana, believe in billahi wa malaikatihi wa kutubihi wa rusuli, and God,
But notice, yeah, that's correct.
and
But
his,
notice that's not a
you know what I mean?
definition. I'm going to suggest you're really back projecting a lot of the assumptions into the thing, right? We're assuming, or you're assuming, that having that is just to affirm is just to affirm the thing, right? In fact,
Mm,
the greatest proof that iman billah in the Quran does not mean affirming the existence of God, okay,
mm,
is the fact that no one in the revelation denies the existence of God. No one,
mhm,
yeah. The mushrikun affirm Allah. The Jews, the Yahud, the Ahlul Kitab, right, and the Christians, Nasara, Ahlul Kitab also
mm,
affirm Allah.
mm,
I want to add another little masala, yeah, a bit of spice into it. Okay, chapter 12, verse 106. وَمَا يُؤْمِنُ أَكْثَرُهُم بِاللَّهِ إِلَّا وَهُم مُشْرِكُونَ.
mm,
Most of them do not believe in or have faith in God, except they are simultaneously mushrikun.
mm,
The verse prior to that is very interesting because it's saying, uh, okay, so actually, let's just look at a few of the verses prior to that, right? Yeah, so he's saying most people, however eagerly you want them to, will not believe, right? That's 103. You ask no reward from them for this. It's a reminder for all people. There are many signs in the heavens and the earth they pass by and they don't give any heed to. Most of them will only believe in God whilst also joining others with him. So what does that say about Iman and what that means? Clearly, Iman, like we are back projecting. So we're assuming
mhm,
that Iman, because we've come up with this idea of like becoming Muslim by saying this statement that we have come into a mindset, and this is not just affecting like people, within this community of the so-called Muslims, but basically across the board, this is a thing, right? That it comes down to what I am affirming, right? My doctrine. This obsession with doctrinal propositions and affirmations as the prime indicator or even the cornerstone or the basis of thing is an assumption. I just don't think if you read the thing to the extent that we can unclutter ourselves of our assumption and just come fresh into the text, yeah, and to engage with it, I don't think it's saying that, right? Because our understanding about belief. So let's say like every translation in the Revelation for Iman or Aman, etc., said faith, 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 have faith in, have faith in, have faith in. You would read that completely differently if it says believe, 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 because if you're understanding what belief is and it's not faith, but you also won't deny, yeah, that faith is completely valid for Iman, right? The idea of Iman, Amana is like Amina, which is the original form, is to feel safe, is to feel secure. Amana is to seek, right? Is to seek safety and security. It comes back to what we were saying earlier, actually, this is how Islam and Iman kind of connect, I would say, right? You bind yourself in such a way that affords you safety and security. I guess existential. That's why many people who attempt to do that or are in the process of doing that, they'll still complicate their faith with this kind of thing. Now, if you connect with what you said earlier, God won't forgive, will never forgive, right, that his partners are associated with him. If he will never forgive the partners associated, what about all these people who believe, but they're also simultaneously mushrikun, right? What about the other verse? What about the other verse? Inna Allah yaghfiru dhunuba jami'a. There is explicit. It is my favorite section in the whole Revelation. It's extremely powerful, partly because maybe I need it, and it starts with this. Yeah, that right. My very famous, "Oh my servants who've transgressed among themselves, don't despair of God's mercy." Why? Inna Allah yaghfiru dhunuba jami'a. Right. So the idea that he'll never forgive, my thinking with regards to that, I think there has to be a degree of rhetorical. Yeah. So either you have, like, for example, you might do something. Well, maybe, hopefully, you won't. Yeah. But right, you'll do something. I'll say, I just can never forgive you for that. I can never forgive you. Right. Those are the words. Those are the literal words. Someone now later on says, Iqbal said he will never forgive for Azan. Right. But if in 30 years' time, I come to my senses, yeah, nothing has changed. You haven't apologized. You haven't made amends. None of that. Right. Sorry for putting it this way around. We should probably put it the other way around, right? But I forgive you. But then I come to you and I say, that thing that you did, I've let go. I've completely forgiven you. And you're like, what the heck, man? Like, it was no big deal. Yeah, I didn't do anything wrong. Whatever. Right? I forgive you. Right? So did I lie before? No. And for those people who think that that's challenging, I say a rhetorical, idiomatic usage, which is there's one, I can't remember where it is now, but I think it's in Fussilat or somewhere, right? This idea of where in the voice of God is saying, وَإِعْمَلُوا مَا شِئْتُمْ, or just do whatever you want then, right? إِنَّهُ بِمَا تَعْمَلُ خَبِيرٌ. He knows what you're up to. He doesn't literally mean do what you want. You know what I mean? It's like when but we literally say that, right? Because it's reflecting this idea that like how many, like, there's no more angles left to come at you from for this message. Like, if you don't get it, just do what you want. So what I'm trying to say is these things are more complex, I would say, than simply, oh, well, clearly that's that and that's that. So, A plus B equals, or 1 plus 1 equals 2, right? And, it's a lot more nuanced, I would say. And I just think it's so much safer to see it at the level of the state level. Another reason, not just for ourselves, for our humility. And in a sense, I will say to you, well, actually, the benefit for ourselves of not taking on these fixed labels and identities in that kind of way is that we retain the humility to know that it's always about this moment. Like we said last time, I can say I was peaceful yesterday, and today, like, do some harmful or, really harmful thing. My claim of being peaceful yesterday has no bearing. It's about who I actually am inside. Okay. So then what about the reverse? What about the reverse of that? What about when someone's making claims, right, which are worse than their reality? There are certain claims that we might find it's off reality, distasteful. That's not actually a right way to capture what's true, what's real. But maybe in the way the person is actually orienting themselves, they're actually aligning with what's required of them existentially in a much better way, despite those, that the kind of the claims, right? So I do think that the implications of what we're saying, how they settle in both ways, really matter. If it is the case that the stated belief of somebody won't carry much value if their actual orientation, their state, and their actions and what have you. Which is why, I mean, it's so interesting that you mentioned. I think that the verses that actually define Iman are much like those verses. I wouldn't necessarily say that those are definitions of, as much as they're describing like, okay, so maybe certain components of, but it's not a closed definition because, as you well know, right? What about these ones? إنما المؤمنون الذين إذا ذكر الله وجلت قلوبهم. The true believers are only those who, when God's name is mentioned, their hearts soften. Well, by that standard, we're all done. Where's our Iman now? So who's got Iman, right? So I'm just, but you get my point. So sorry, just to say that last bit, which is to say that if the stated belief accompanied with a kind of, say, a malorientation, right? The journey example we gave, I'm really traveling there, I'm going there, I'm taking the journey over there, but like they're literally not. Yeah, they keep saying every time you ask them, well, where are you going to that place? Are you coming? Like, oh, you're waiting for someone. Are you coming? Are you coming? Are you coming? What? They keep saying, yeah, I'm coming. But they're literally not even turning. There's not turning up, right? So now does the stated proposition matter or the reality matter? Similarly, right? So interestingly, on the opposite end, somebody might say to you, listen, I'm really sorry. I don't think I can make it. I can't come, right? Something changes. And then like, half a day later, they've turned up and they've kind of surpassed your expectations in reality. Yeah. So what I'm just giving these as examples of, essentially more complexity. And so the benefit for us is humility. The benefit with regards to how we see others is non-judgment. If we now think about it, isn't the combination of humility for ourselves and humility with respect to the reality of others the perfect combination to bring everyone together to where we need to get to? Right? This is the central point of this entire discussion. Somebody said, I think one of the comments of the last videos, you should stop talking and touch grass. I touch grass all the time, right? And I'm telling you, that's probably half the reason, or more than half the reason, as to why I think this is. That's where all this is coming from. I'm gonna say all this comes from grass and trees, right? Because literally, nature's not calling out to you to say, "Call me something." Tell me I'm a tree. Yeah, tell me I'm the sky. Nature's just doing, right? It's moving, it's flowing, right? And your thing is to observe. Like we know that it's not quite right to observe the rain and complain. It's not work. It doesn't. Not working for me. Look at the ego in that one. Man, that's crazy, man. I mean, look, that's ego. That's a kind of shirk, to be honest, frankly. That is, I'm no jokes. Yeah, that's a clear manifestation. Clear, right? I don't like the fact that it's raining. Man, like that is literally, straight up. I mean, that is a straight up rude. That's rude. That's real rude, man, to the host, capital H. Yeah?
Yep.
Okay, so what I'm saying is that, so I'm just saying that, but that humility non-judgment combination is so critical, because we don't want the judgment of others towards us based on the label that we carry. I mean, I don't, but people carry. They don't want to be judged as such because they are X, right? If that X was dropped and these people could see you as a human being for who you actually are, the substantial level, and vice versa, right? And then we can work the rest out as we go. So I'm just saying, philosophically, pragmatically, scripturally, again, I rest my case.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot.
You should interrupt me more. I think I'm really bad at it. Sorry, I just go on.
Well,
but why don't you try to summarize what makes sense and what doesn't, what resonates and doesn't?
Well, no, I mean, look, everything made sense. But I do have some questions and some maybe counterpoints. One is I completely agree with you in that in the aspect of non-judgment and humility. That's for sure. That one should not assume that just because they have the label or the fundamental belief that they are somehow now, just, they're good to go. And of course, that's where the good works comes in. And one should not also assume and judge that, oh, just because someone else is not that now they're, not good. So I completely agree with that. And I think, one point you made, not in our conversations, but really impacted me personally, was just the way we look at others, non-Muslims, quote unquote. It's like we look at anyone that's not Muslim as non-Muslim. And that's kind of the, what if we just looked at them as, number one, just a human being, obviously. And number two, looked at them as basically Like you're not like unsure of, okay, what am I trying to say here? Sorry, one second. Um, or almost looking at it with the assumption of like, oh no, we almost look at people, non-Muslims, assuming that they are, you know, on the wrong path
Misguided, yeah.
versus, yeah, misguided versus what if we assume the opposite, you know?
Yeah.
And
I'm going to
that
go,
stood
so
out to
to
me when
put
you
it
said
really
that.
explicitly, yeah,
Yeah,
assume that this person
yeah,
is more
yeah.
aligned with reality, more manifesting of the qualities that are beloved to God, and in fact, in truth, more beloved to God than I am. How about that?
Mhm.
And we
Yeah.
know that there is absolutely no way, right?
Mm.
I'm telling you, in most day-to-day cases I'm talking about, right? We
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
like, where there's no like real obvious kind of,
Right.
like clear intended aggression, vice, like in a kind
That's
of,
right.
like in an unrepentant, which when I'm saying all that, I literally think, like, you look at the revelation, that's the qualities of people of true kufr, right?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
absolute hardness, stubbornness, obstinacy, a rejection, arrogance, kibr, right? Kibr is the
Mhm.
key. All right, we said
Yes.
humility. Kibr is a key quality. Look at the kibr that we display. Look at the arrogance we display, right?
That's right. Yeah.
In looking at this person. In fact, in the narration, the prophetic narration that defines kibr, ghamtun nas, yeah,
Mhm.
looking down, belittling other people, nas, right?
Yeah.
So just the fact that I've started with that assumption, right,
Yeah.
is horrible. So I would all like literally challenge ourselves to reverse it. And when you do that, all of a sudden it's just, I mean, it's I want to say beautiful, right? Actually, like
Yeah.
that will bring you a beautiful life, beautiful
It will. Yeah.
interactions, and beauty on earth.
Yeah. I heard you say it. I listened to one of your videos a few months ago, and ever since then, it's like you changed the lens through which you're looking at people and looking
That's
at the
literally what we've
world.
been saying. Change the lens,
And
change
so
the frame.
every interaction that you have, grocery store, park, wherever,
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
almost looking at the person just as a fellow human being. You're no
Yeah,
longer like, oh, I wonder if this person's a Muslim or not, or this or that, you know?
yeah.
It really
Mm-hmm.
does change the way you interact with people, the way you see people. Yeah, so I really appreciate that. Now, going to some of the points that you mentioned, I mean, number one is, have not the scholars differentiated between major shirk and minor shirk, right? So again, you referenced a couple, one verse at least, in which even in the context of believers, you have shirk being mentioned. But is there not kind of a major explicit shirk and then kind of a minor implicit shirk? So like even the verse you referenced last time, which was أَفَرَأَيْتَ or أَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ, right? Like, have you not seen the one who has taken his own or her own desires as their Lord or as their ilah, as like the most important, highest priority, almost something that they worship in a sense. But again, like that's different. That's almost like this like ongoing struggle, right? Like you said, I would say we are all mushriks on some level, actually, right? We all commit shirk, minor shirk in some form on probably on a daily basis. Whenever we put ourselves before our salah, that's a form of shirk, you could say, right? So how would you address that?
Yeah, look, let's look. By the way, I just want to mention, because it is important before we finish today, to look at that other verse in Al Imran
Yes,
of
we'll get to that. Yeah,
وَمَن يَبْتَغِ غَيْرَ الْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا, yeah, because you mentioned that, it's obviously foundational.
absolutely.
But I want to just, yeah, so this is a good example, right? So let me just say one thing. Yeah, the first thing I want to say is uh, it's important to note, yeah, you're saying scholar said, okay, fine. You read the revelation, there's absolutely no indication of something called major and minor shirk. There is just shirk. Okay? So that's number one. Of course, like, you don't need to ask anybody, yeah, to know that there are grades of things. But there are grades of every single thing. There are grades of Islam, the grades of Iman, grades of kufr, grades of shirk, grades of nifaq, right? You have the idea of like the lowest levels of the fire, right? On the highest level, the darajat of the heavens, right? So
Mhm.
the fact that it's a spectrum across the board for
Yeah.
absolutely anything and everything is a given. I don't need to ask, Sheikh X. Okay. So that's number one. Secondly, you mentioned that example as something that, okay, that's part of the effort, the day to day, and this is mentioned twice. Ara'ayta, and in one place, afara'ayta man ittakhadha
Mhm.
ilahahu hawa, right? As an ilah, right? As a god, as an objective of their devotion, they take their desire.
Mhm.
All right.
Mhm.
And when we look at that, when we read that, we think, we correctly, I would say, we worry that, well, like, I do that like quite regularly. Yeah. Like put my ego preferences, my desire before a consideration about what God wants, what's most aligned with the divine, what's the purest best. And if it's what God wants or it's aligned with the divine, that means the purest, best, most noble, most virtuous thing to do in that moment. But I didn't do that, or I didn't hold myself back from like and display the righteousness by holding myself back from something. Instead, I followed my desire. Okay. I'm going to probably say that in my life, like that's probably happened every day.
That's right.
Okay. All right, fine. Now we're going to say, oh, okay, fine. That's like, that's cool. That's just like, that's all right, but in this, just minor shirk there, no problem.
I didn't
But
say that. I didn't. I mean, yes.
no, I
didn't
know.
say that. I didn't say minor shirk is okay, but I know. Yeah.
Listen. You got to allow some. I've got a tease as well. Yeah. So, but look at this. As I said last time, always look around the verse. To the people who comment within the first 30 minutes of a 1 hour, 45-minute YouTube video and start giving counterpoints, like on one, either hyper specific or just run, like they respond to the title. Okay. I mean, anyway, that's what ends up happening. Okay. So it's saying here, so this is in chapter 25, verse 41. Whenever they see you, they ridicule you. Is this the one God has sent as a messenger? He might almost have led us astray from our gods if we had not stood so firmly by them. When they see the punishment, they will know who's furthest from the path. Think, addressing the prophet, peace upon him, think of the man who has taken his own passion as a god. Are you to be his guardian? Do you think that most of the hero understand? They're just like cattle. They're further from the path. What I'm trying to say is that this quality, that has been meant that we can see ourselves in, as we should be looking as a mirror, if you want to say, is mentioned in the context of what, seemingly at the time, some of the worst of the people. Either we'll say, oh, well, clearly around verses around are talking about people who are like really against the messenger, right? So, well, that's not us, So then the fact that quality mentioned is clearly one of those things. That, for example, that's often mentioned, that very, very, very strong chastisement of the hypocrisy and how that manifests in the salah, right? That the munafiqeen, that they deceive God, but rather he deceives them. And that when they stand for prayer, they stand lazily to be seen of people, and they only remember God a little bit. Now look at those descriptions of the hypocrites in their salah. Look at the description, right? It's literally the description of most of our prayers, right? Especially the last part, the scary. They remember God only a little bit, but they actually remember him. So they do actually make some effort to make some connection somewhere. But only a little bit. It's not enough. And then munafiqeen, 2 verses later, they're in the lowest pit of the fire. Okay. Now, okay, fine. All that needs to pack it. But I've heard, when I've mentioned this sometimes as a way to just really get us to take things seriously, some people who want to object to that immediately say, but those munafiqun, that's not us. That's referring to the people who were the munafiqun of that time. But then if that's the case, then this is what I really hate, this kind of like selective, like kind of choices. Because then then all nifaq in the Quran is not about me or about the possibilities for me or you now today in 21st century wherever, because it was about that time. But then it's all about that time. So why are we even looking at it? This is what I'm trying to say. So I'm just going to say that minor, major, again, think existentially. So useful. Yes, assume kufr applies to you, shirk applies to you, nifaq applies to you, and assume also the possibilities, the highest possibilities apply to you too. Iman, ihsan, and existentially, away from all of this discussion and thought and whatever, we know that we can stoop to the lowest level of the low, and we can become the highest of the high. We've experienced these highs and lows in our own life, right? We know.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree with that. I had another follow-up question, which was in relation to the distinction between الذين آمنوا and المؤمنون. So if you could share any reflections on that.
Yeah, so obviously, those who have faith are those who believe, and the believers or the faithful. Again, this is not unique. الذين اتقوا المتقون. Yeah, الذين أسلموا even. وأخبتوا, that comes to mind. Yeah, Muslimin, mukhbitin. I mean, it basically applies to all of them, right? Like, so you have a verb and you have those who do such a thing, right? Even in English or most languages, right? You'll have that. Sometimes these things get overdone in there. I think, well, this means this and that means that. Like, I think that's a loser's game to basically say that in every instant of alladhina amanu means this, and in every instant of mu'minun or mu'min it means that. Like, you're going to find mass contradictions if you're going to start going down that route. You know how I said earlier that um, like you do something continuously such that eventually like that becomes your way, right? Someone keeps displaying honesty until they're called honest.
I see. Yes.
Now that person, this is an honest person. In fact, right? Someone keeps being generous, right, or kind until that's the thing that people say about this person. Oh, what do you think about this person? He's really what? What's the first word that comes to mind? Whatever that word comes to mind in terms of a quality is going to be a reflection of the repeated actions along the way. And now we're going to say he's this kind of person. Inna alladhina
Yeah,
taqaw,
that
who
makes sense.
display that, yeah, like you could look at that in the moment, let's say, but muttaqun is something like this is now talking more about their permanent state, you know, their again, an orientation that has become habitual, conscious but habitual, internalized, realized, is dropped from the head and the ears and the tongue down into the heart and the body, and it's manifesting all over the place. Yeah, I think it's something to do with that.
Okay. Another question is why does Allah mention so often in the Quran, "Inna alladhina amanu wa amilu salihat"? If those two things were almost one and the same, why distinguish between the two?
Yeah. Firstly, I would say this is a very common Quranic pattern to say things one after the other when one is subsumed within the other, right? So that example we gave earlier from Surah Al-Bayyinah, وَمَا أُمِرُوا إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ حُنَفَاءَ. They're not commanded except to serve or worship one God, purifying their orientation, okay, their way for Him. Hunafa, as people who are again devoted, leaning to God, etc. All right. There is no action of service or worship of God, like more like a internal kind of quality or feeling at the emotional level or at the mental level or the physical level, that is not subsumed within ibadah in that way. Like that is mukhlisin lahu-ddin hunafa, like with ibadah, that's like that's the whole, in your words, package. Okay. Or right. But straight after that, wa yuqimu salah wa yu'tu zakah. But then they establish prayer and give zakah. So first thought would be, but that's not outside of the deen. That's not outside of ibadah. That's part of ibadah. That's part of deen, but it's also added on. Why? Emphasis. Emphasis. Yeah. And my point being is simply that, like that in and of itself doesn't say that these are two distinct things that have no overlap. And I would suggest that there's almost a complete overlap between them, because the idea of, certainly the idea that there is Iman in a level of completion, right? As a mu'min, like someone is a mu'min, they're actually displaying faith, right? Okay. How does that not have righteous deeds, like almost as part and parcel of it? Do you know what I'm trying to say? And as you said, like even in the subsequent technical definitions that emerged about Iman, right? And this is why even the famous narration of Gabriel, right, where the Islam, Iman, Ihsan is kind of defined. See the Iman definition there, right? When people look at that narration, they often, the first or most automatic response is just to look at it again doctrinally as affirmation. I believe in this, I believe in that, I believe in the other. Okay. But then, as you well said last time, like the definitions that various scholars over time proposed, like as a technical definition, if you want to say, or as a way to appreciate the concept, was a much more holistic definition, which included manifestation, which included the amlu salihat, right? So they themselves many times didn't distinguish that the actions that are manifested is distinct from iman. They could say that no, these are bound up. How could it be like separated? And again, this is because we have just, especially in the modern times, right, and recent times, we've just been like bombarded with this tyranny of doctrines and propositions of what matters. I'm just going to say that this is not normal.
Yeah, I actually never thought about it like that. That one encompasses the other when it comes to inna alladhina amanu wa amilu salihat. A couple of verses that come to mind. One directly related to this, and then one related to everything we're discussing. So the first is inna alladhina amanu. And I don't have the reference in front of me, but inna alladhina amanu walladhina hajaru wa jahadu fi sabilillah. So,
yeah, excellent. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So it's not like those second thing and the third thing are
right. So in that one, those who have faith,
right?
Those who have faith and those who migrate and those who strove for the sake of God. Yeah, they're not distinct. They're clearly overlapping. And for jahadu especially, yeah, innamal mu'minun ... yujahiduna fi sabilillah, jahadu fi sabilillah. The true believers are only, like, if you don't strive for God's cause, you're not a true believer. That's experience. I mean, this is one of the most, piercing Quranic concepts. Yeah. Like, okay, my last day leader course, which is available freely on the website, okay, is literally a commentary on how do you bring this idea of jihad fi sabilillah, striving God's cause, into your life? Okay. There are verses that suggest that it is a necessary precondition of avoiding the fire of hell that you are striving fully in God's cause, like really clearly. Okay.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying
Yeah.
is, the reality is, I think the thing that we somehow need to expose ourselves to, disorienting and unsettling as it is, but healthy as it is, I think, as well, existentially speaking, is that just to realize the standard is just so much higher than we assume. And my part of my problem with the whole label and doctrine thing is that if it brings an atom's weight of assurance or sense of safety, right? Like, I just think that's too much. It's not that we shouldn't be hopeful. To be hopeful, to maintain a sense of positivity, right? This self-fulfilling prophecies are almost like this is a truism, yeah, of like how life functions. Like, there's that reciprocal energy and momentum, or the opposite. We know what upwards and downward spirals look like in life, okay? And where does it all start? At the mental level, right? Or the internal level. I think everything we'll ever subsequently say in this engagement will just keep coming back and proving these first things that we have begun this series of chats with, that you will see it doesn't mean what you think it means. You know, it's just that we're so caught up in the web. That's the matrix. I see through it. Basically, I see through it. Like, I just feel I see through it, and I can't unsee it personally. But it doesn't make me feel, but like I've just been saying, it doesn't make me feel like I've made it in any way. In fact, it's completely the opposite. You just realize that, like, the as I said, the standard is so high. The number of veils that we have between us, obscuring reality, that's referenced in terms of the ways in which that we don't allow the light to shine through us, the divine light to shine through us. Like, we do that, right? We erect these things, okay, and we put these things there, and all of this, like, this way of seeing things just allows you to see that so clearly in yourself, so much. But it helps, at least. And then it helps you work on it, and all the other benefits that we've spoken of. You know, life ultimately, to realize what we need to realize, is simply about subtraction. Because it's all there, basically. The reality is all there, right? Like, that. It's not like, if God's light is hidden from us, I just need to unblock. That's literally it, and let the light shine. Let it come through. You know.
Yes. It reminds me of the well-known narration of the Prophet, peace be upon him, in which he talks about that, essentially how to attain God's love, if I recall correctly. And he talks about, it's through the essential actions, and then once you do that, then you do even more so voluntarily, and then I think it says something like your hand. It's almost like God is, your
So God
actions
doesn't
are like manifesting God. Yeah.
So my servant doesn't come closer to me, right? Except through what I've obligated, and then paraphrasing, and then continues in voluntary deeds until I love him. And when I love him, I become the eyes with which he sees, right? The ears with which he hears, etc., etc.
Yes. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, that's a kind of nuclear fusion, right? that is like the existential fusion. That's it. But that's the point. You just get out your own way. So
Exactly.
so that
That's
kind
right,
of as in other traditions talk about the divine spark within, right?
Yeah.
And statements that come to mind are, I looked for God, I found only myself. I looked for myself, I found only God. They seem like difficult or even problematic, or some might say blasphemous statements. But the point, what they're trying to get at, is the fact that there is a level of, if they're seen as blasphemous or difficult, then you're going to have to contend with stuff, well, in your own tradition, basically, right? In verses as well, by the way. We spoke last time, or a couple of times ago, wa'tasimu billah, cling to God, hold to God. I mean, look at the intimacy of the language, right? And the closeness and the proximity, and if you help God, he'll help you, and all of these reciprocity verses are extremely, extremely beautiful, powerful, poignant, and like, you can feel that, man. Like, you literally can feel that, you know? And this is the real discussion, honestly. Like, this is the real discussion. The rest of the stuff, it's not like because I've got some like philosophical mental hang up about it, and I just want to find something so I can be a contrarian for the sake of it. No, it's because for myself, and then I think I have seen so many, like, over years and years and years and years, so many ways in which all of this is a big part of the thing that's obscuring us, essentially.
Yeah.
And when we bring this kind of existential thing into our public narrative, then, man, that is literally like, that's unstoppable. That is so infectious. Why? Because it speaks to what everybody knows
Mm,
deep down.
yeah.
So the kufr, which is
Yeah.
the hiding or the suppression of the actual thing, like you just can't hide it. You just have to come into the light. Wallahu
Yeah.
mutimmu nurihi. Then that's it. That's where the tammun nur comes, the completion of the light.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a great point. You know, because sometimes people, as those who are listening, might wonder, like, well, what is the practical? I mean, we've of course been discussing some practical aspects, how it applies to your relationship with God, how it applies to obviously the way you're manifesting your belief on a day-to-day basis, and how you have to constantly renew it. Um, I feel like this is so important because so many people have uh, honestly just been put off by the way religion has been approached and discussed and practiced.
Yes, exactly.
And, you know, it's like, why would I want to be a part of this? Why would I want to, like, it just seems
Right.
so complicated. Everybody within even the same faith are like against each other and they're arguing on these minor points. And is this even about God anymore? Like, you know, or is it about my clique, my cult, my group, whatever, you know?
Yeah, and the
And
hierarchies, the
I think,
institutions, the rules, the this and that, and
yeah,
everything else. Meaning, all of these things have their
yeah,
place, but not if they become central hallmarks of the thing called religion that is going
yeah,
to that moves everything away from the existential. I'm not saying these things are all
exactly.
important. These are all civilizational, um, like societal, civilizational manifestations, right? But it all comes down to the
Yeah.
foundation. And by the way, look to your point, right? Just to connect to the idea of deen. Yeah, look at the verse. وَمَا جَعَلَ عَلَيْكُمْ فِي الدِّينِ مِنْ حَرَجٍ. Right? There's no, he
Beautiful.
hasn't
Yeah.
made, man, those verses are just too much, man. They're too much. We could just spend a whole episode, right?
Uh,
The last couple of verses of Surah Al-Hajj, Hajj, right? 22, right? ما جعل عليكم في الدين من حرج. I love it when verses like that, they challenge like certain people who think they're
mm,
all over the deen, right? They say, God hasn't placed any hardship in this deen for you. And then obviously the narrations, ad-deen yusr, the deen is easy, right?
mm,
And then I know that you know, right? Even though we haven't discussed it before, I don't think, right? That people will seek to qualify that, you know? They'll seek to say, oh, don't misunderstand what it's saying. Like deen's not really, easy in the way that you think it's saying it's easy. That's because they don't know what deen is. They don't even know
mm,
what they're referring to, right? Before they seek to contradict the very things that they believe in. Where's the belief gone now?
yeah,
You know? The deen is easy.
yeah,
Why? Now look, if we look at our explanation of deen, the one that you and I have been discussing, right? The orientation is simple, right? The
mm,
approach is a simple approach. Take a simple
yeah,
approach.
yeah.
Take the
That's
right,
right.
the
Actually, the
easy,
word simple came to my mind. Yeah.
yeah, the simple, like the thing that you always remind me to. Can you just like make it simple? Yeah. I remember now. This is connecting to something completely different. Gosh, like I think you and I must have discussed this before, but I remember when I was running the charity, that I came across this management book called Founder's Mentality. And it's basically about
Mm,
like when you get into large organizations. Okay, it's very interesting because it's
yeah.
very similar to like what I'm talking about. I'm talking about having a way in relation to God, which is the startup mentality. Yeah, that's how you
Mm,
want to have startup mentality, right? Everybody knows that's where the rush is. That's where the real deal is.
yeah.
The founders for whom it was a process that was beautiful, not the hard outcomes that was the main thing, but it was the
Mm,
process and the product, the thing that they were building and why they were building it and the meaning of the thing, right? For them, when it becomes like structurally complicated and everything else, unless they fight very hard for the culture, for themselves and for people in that thing, right? Right, to protect that founder's mentality, which is why this book came. I think it was Bain Consulting, one of the, like McKinsey, one of the major consulting companies, right? Just how do you get this founder's mentality back into like large corporations and institutions so that they don't ossify and get clunky and bureaucratic? And we all know, like anyone who's worked in any kind of institution,
mm,
like this is like the human problem. Why do we think that the same human beings who do that in their companies, in their public service institutions, aren't doing the same things with their religions, quote unquote? Same stuff. No founder's
mm,
mentality, no prophetic mentality. Every prophet was a
mm,
founder. Yeah. And at
mm.
that level, and that's constant, you need that all the time. Why is there the decline? Ultimately, I'm going to say because you lost founder's mentality. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that. Is that what you need? And that's a way of being, right? With the faith then.
I love what you said about you know, at some level, it's not about the destination as much as it is about the journey and the process and who you become on that journey. And almost another saying is having a love for the game. So yeah, I mean, it made me a bit emotional as you were talking about that. And then yeah, just this whole analogy actually was very, very powerful. The whole founder and startup and everything like that. So yeah, it just really it's a very it's a major perspective shift when you think about it like that, you know? Even the whole like looking at yourself as part of I mean, there's just so much to it. Like you're a part of this startup. You have a certain role to fulfill within the startup. You have to figure out, okay, what is my role to now help this startup flourish and succeed? And and you're having regular check-ins with the boss, you know, every day. With so yeah, I really appreciate that. And obviously, coming from like a business marketing background, it really hit home with me. So thank you for that.
But just super briefly,
Um,
just on that, isn't one of the other
yeah,
key things about the fact that role definitions are much more fluid in the startup world? Whereas once things
that's
become,
right. Yeah.
what's it, right? Then people start to identify much more tightly with their job description and with their title. And that becomes a source of what? Pride, arrogance, not helping, not extending
Mm,
beyond their thing, right? Like, that's my job. That's not my job. That's not my job. Whereas in a startup world, that's like criminal. But you want to maintain
right.
that. So what I'm trying to say is, again, you start to identify, lines start to be drawn, departmental
Mm,
silos. Yeah. So all of
yeah.
this is all the same stuff, right? Sectarianism. Oh, we mentioned that thing to mention that verse, right? وَلْتَكُنْ
Yes.
مِنْكُمْ
Yes. Yeah.
أُمَّةٌ يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ وَيَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. Let there be from amongst you, right, an ummah. Okay, we need to have a session on ummah one day, please, yeah?
Yeah. I have that. I have that as a note actually, as one of the other labels or terms used in the
Oh, dude,
Quran.
please don't even get me started. Right. Okay. But here in this case, right, وَلْتَكُنْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٌ, let there be from amongst you. And it's interesting because the prior verse is addressing you who believe. So from amongst you who believe,
Mm,
let there be an ummah. So here,
mm,
one clear example of ummah is not all believers necessarily, right? Leave that aside. Okay. Let there be from amongst you a group, a community, يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ, who invite to good.
mm,
وَيَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ, right? They encourage good and they forbid wrongdoing. وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. Those are the successful ones. وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ تَفَرَّقُوا وَاخْتَلَفُوا مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَهُمُ الْبَيِّنَاتُ وَأُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمْ عَذَابٌ عَظِيمٌ. It's saying here, don't be like those who divide themselves up into groups. So
mm,
become into factions, تفرق, right? They become into factions. واختلفوا, and they differ with one another من بعد جاءهم البينات, after clear guidances have come to them. أولئك لهم عذاب
mhm,
عظيم. For them is a strong punishment. Okay.
mm,
Like, look, we're discussing, as you know, we're discussing the label issue at this kind of macro level. But as we have said before,
mm,
within each of these so-called religions, or preferably cumulative traditions is what I want to go for. Within each of these, you have multiple subdivisions, capitalized
yeah.
labels to define this group. Across every single one of these, you have that. And certainly, it is one of the main causes of frustration, sadness, desolation, like inability to come up with any kind of coherent collective movement or passageway to a collective vision. It's a block to our orientation, right? It's a
Mm,
block to the deen, right? Where you divide
yeah.
yourself up. And that's labeled on the sub level within this thing. Now,
Yeah.
everyone might say, oh,
That's
within,
right.
well, we're all Muslim. We're all within. We all have Iman. We're all within. So, and sometimes like diversity, certainly diversity should be celebrated. And even diversity of opinion should be celebrated, sure. Or like, not celebrated as like it's necessarily good. I mean, it depends what it is, right? Because sometimes diversity can mean no one really knows what to do or what's right, what's wrong, like better, worse, wise, not wise. What I mean to say is that we know how much, right, internal division. Sometimes it's on theological,
Mm,
legal, ethnic, ethno-cultural grounds,
mm,
right? Down to the very local level. And then in terms of how it plays out in so many different ways, sometimes on class grounds as well, within different communities and stuff. There's no bindedness, no binding within. Why? Because you broke up. And
mm,
and 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 God, who represents unity, like literally, yeah, like clearly in this case, if you want to again put it in as a more personal sense, he just doesn't like it, and he will crush it. Once upon a time, this debate or this argument I would have, or this discussion we have on the basis of don't put an adjective. Okay, fine, you're going to call yourself Muslim, but don't put an adjective in front of it, or two or three. Everyone wants to know,
right.
okay, like, oh, theologically, he was a Ash'ari, and then legally he was a Hanafi, and then, you know, by his Sufi tariqah was X. And unless we know that about this classical historical character, like we won't know. Oh, now we know Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, right? Now he's clearly, you know, this is the way forward. So now we all know. Oh, because we managed to box him within our little neat packages. Please, what has this got to do with anything? With all this kind of, what has it got to do with anything?
Yeah. I mean, I think obviously you know, historically at that time, perhaps for whatever reason, certain discussions, certain
I'm not saying
labels,
why,
certain
I'm not necessarily criticizing why they came up. I'm just saying right now, even when we
but
do all this stuff,
now,
crazy.
absolutely, absolutely,
Ridiculous.
yeah, yeah. So we haven't gotten to the verse of وَمَن يَبْتَغِي
Do you want to
غَيْرَ
finish with it?
الْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا.
Just to complete.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, nice and easy. So, okay. Oh man. Yeah. Oh, this is juicy. This is a nice way to finish. Okay, cool. So let's start with 83. Yeah. Okay, to remind ourselves of the rule. Read around the verse. It's really powerful, honestly. Yeah. It's very beautiful. So start with verse 83, which interestingly starts with a very similar phraseology. أَفَغَيْرَ دِينِ اللَّهِ يَبْغُونَ. Do they seek a deen? Well, do they seek other than the deen of Allah? Interesting, Abdul Halim says, do they seek anything other than submission to God? I mean, he translates it straight. So listen, like, I didn't tell him to do that. Yeah. That's not my conspiracy out here. Okay. Like, right? وَلَهُ أَسْلَمَ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Yeah. طَوْعًا وَكَرْهًا وَإِلَيْهِ يُرْجَعُونَ. And to him, to God, submits everything in the heavens and earth, willingly or unwillingly. Right? And they will all be returned to him. Look at that, man. Right? So are you going to seek other than the way of God, submission to God, when everything aslama? Now he says, he translates other than submission to God, but what you have here is deenillah, right? So the God's way, I'm going to say, like, it's easiest here, I think, right? Do they seek a way other than God's way? Like, are they seeking anything other than God's way, right?
Yeah.
When everything, well, it says, interesting, whoever, man fis samawati. Again, man, that's interesting because man fis samawati wal ard is like, why isn't it ma fis samawati? Why is it not what is in the heavens and earth? Why is it who is in the heavens and earth? I think now this maybe links to that notion, which is becoming a popular once again, or which is this panpsychism idea, right? Everything has consciousness, even the apparently inanimate, right? And that really vibes with a lot of the verses, right?
Yeah.
I want to get into it now, but كُلٌّ قَدْ عَلِمَ صَلَاةَ وَتَسْبِيحَ, right? Everything in the heavens and earth.
Right,
everything in the heavens and earth has its own form of salah and tasbih. Okay? Now, everything is vibrational.
Yeah.
Okay? So, if vibration needs to happen in a pattern. A pattern. That's another great word for all this. A pattern. There's a pattern. Okay? So, aslama man fi. So, how does everything in the heavens and earth, seemingly inanimate, but perhaps conscious in a way that we're not quite, haven't yet fully understood? Yeah.
By the way, before you continue, just to add one verse, as you all know, وَلِلَّهِ يَسْجُدُ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, exactly. So to God, yeah. So everything or whoever in the heavens and earth prostrates to God. Okay.
Yeah.
Another great example of idiomatic usage, right? So a word that seems to say something, but clearly says in the context says something else than what you think. But what you get the notion, the salah and the tasbih, right? There's this connection, this orientation, this reorientation. The salah, therefore, as a way of reorienting ourselves, brings hyper connects to all this idea. So do they seek other than the deen of Allah, right? Other than God's way, when everything in the heavens and earth, aslama lahu, right? Like devotes itself, submits itself, surrenders itself to him. So that's saying the deen is Islam, but it's not like, okay, what, like the religion of, now it just gets silly because what are you going to talk about? The religion of the heavens and earth? Is that what we're going to say? Right? The religion of the heavens and earth is Islam, capital I? No, but then why do you think your Islam, like why do we have to, like what makes it beautiful is to completely synchronize it. That's what I'm saying. Think existentially.
Exactly, yeah.
So for existentially, I'm not going to say like, it's completely bizarre to say like literally the solar system is Muslim, capital M. To me, that's just as bizarre as saying like these previous prophets were Muslim, capital M. Like it doesn't make sense, right? Then in translation, say the prophets were told to say amanna billah, right? We have faith in God. What was sent down to us, what was sent down to, and then various prophets. Okay, Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, the tribes. We believe, we have faith in what's been given to Moses, Jesus, the prophets from their Lord. We don't make a distinction between any of them. By the way, that's important. If there's no distinction to be made, and if they're not capital M Muslim, then why are these ones? Why subsequently? I mean, you can't, like, again, the number of internal contradictions you run into, it just gets too much. And then what? We don't make any distinction. وَنَحْنُ لَهُ مُسْلِمُونَ. And we're devoted to him. Lahu, again, Muslim lahu, Muslim to him. So you can't say we are Muslim, capital M to him. That's why, Abdul Halim, it is to him that we devote ourselves. In fact, let me give you the other option here, which is obviously a common option nowadays, right? Which is the clear Quran, Mustafa Khattab, right? He says, and to him we fully submit, right? نَحْنُ لَهُ مُسْلِمُونَ. Okay, then وَمَنْ يَبْتَغِي غَيْرَ الْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا فَلَنْ يُقْبَلَ مِنْهُ.
Then it just
now,
makes,
if
you don't even
anyone
need to.
seeks, now if anyone seeks other than al-Islam, a deen, other than submission, devotion, a deen, and orientation, it will not be accepted from that person, and in the hereafter, this person will be from amongst the losers, right? Now, it's so interesting. Abdul Halim, if anyone seeks a religion still, other than, in square brackets, Islam, small I, but then complete devotion to God. If you remember last time, it was the other way around.
That's right.
In his translation, he did the opposite. He put the devotion to God, he put the Islam outside of square brackets, small I still, right? But put devotion to God in brackets, something like this, right? Whereas here it's reversed. Again, contending with the difficulties because it breaks down. But I'm going to suggest that I told you in the first discussion, like for me, a critical value is like coherence. Yeah, like you can synchronize between the different things. Like, you're not saying one thing only because it sounds or feels good, but it just makes no sense anywhere else. It's like to iron out the creases. It's try to achieve a new synthesis, right? Based on whatever available information. Yeah. So that's it really, right? If you seek a pathway, an orientation, an attitude, right? These are things that, like, I think a pathway is nice. All right. If you seek a pathway other than complete devotion to God, it won't be accepted from you. Makes complete sense. Existentially, makes complete sense, right? Now, if you're going to say, well, if you seek a religion other than capital I Islam, then you won't be done for it. Then you're going to get into all of the dramas and complications, right? I'm just going to say, like, again, in today's day and age, and based on these two verses, that it seems very clear to me that if you want to, that in the same context, you've got the Islam of the heavens and earth mentioned, right? You've got the Islam fundamentally of the other prophets mentioned, because we don't make a distinction amongst them, and nahnu lahum, we are submitted to God like they were submitted to God. Now, if you're going to seek an orientation other than submission or devotion to God, well, it won't be accepted from you, right? So again, submission, devotion to God. And even that, I'm going to say, again, it all comes down to how, like we said, okay, if we understand, okay, God more in the personal being sense, yeah? Like that sense that we have of God in the beyond up there, us down here, right? And this kind of idea of orienting ourselves to this, an external viewer, watcher, hearer, seer, commander, etc., right? Then the idea of submission, and then the kind of king analogy, which is all over the Revelation, right? To be a loyal subject of a king in that sense. Or we want to look at the more impersonal sense of an interpenetrating, existence, force, being in that sense, whose kind of order is integrated into reality, in an inseparable cosmic way. And then we want to think about aligning with that and integrating our internal, right, to that. So then it's like the things coming into sync, like we said before, and this fusion takes place, right? And you get glimpses sometimes, and if you can maintain it, then you're on a different level. Okay, that I think is then what is then termed the idea of wilaya, yeah. Okay, you're a friend of God essentially, right? And in fact, that in that narration we missed that part, but that's the wali.
That's right. It's the first part,
yeah, it's mentioned there, right?
That's right. That's right.
That's it, and then well, frankly. And then that's like, yadullahi fawqa aydihim, the hand of God is over their hands. Like, that pledge is real. It's like, like, I don't know if before you play ball, that you kind of with your team stick your hands in the middle, and do that thing, right? But see, that's it. That's what that is. Then you're just so aligned. Okay, that's what that whole gesture, that human gesture, what's that all about? When in the team you all huddle and you put your hands in the middle, right? That in the Revelation, that's about the pledge of Hudaybiyah and all that. You're so aligned. There's such an alignment between the faithful at that point in time that God is saying that, like, my hand is over your hands. Yeah. Like there is, and clearly we know that's metaphorical, but it clearly speaks of a kind of like an alignment with, like, absolutely in that moment. And this is why it's about the fittingness always in the moment. Yeah. in that moment, you had the orientation, the right mix, and the balance and the approach and whatever. That just was the perfect, like, connection and reflection of like what's ultimate.
Yeah.
And that, my
May
friend,
God give
is what
us
it means
that.
to be quote unquote Muslim and to do
Yeah.
quote unquote Islam.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you for that. May God give us that alignment with Him as much as possible throughout our lives, and especially the day on which we return to Him. Amen. So, in terms of what I want to discuss next in our, God willing, our upcoming conversation, I think there's a big question of how. We talk about devotion to God, surrender to God, submission to God. The question is the how. There's still, to be honest, some questions I have even around belief and labels around belief, you know, specifically of other quote unquote religions. And someone says they believe in whatever, I believe meaning like even in the way they practice and
Yeah,
how it
sure, sure.
manifests, right?
Yeah,
Whether
so they
it's
actually
Christians with
manifest. Yeah, so they
Jesus
actually
or idols.
manifest like a kind of idolatry or whatever. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay. Well, we
exactly.
can come to
And
that.
so just talking about that and you know, yeah. So and then just the how, like, you say, okay, well, we agree, okay, this is the path, devotion to God. Well, not everybody agrees on what that devotion looks like, or the how of the devotion or the surrender or whatever, So so all of these differences come about in belief and practice, and then all these labels have come about as a result. How do you then sort of figure that, make sense of all that? And that's, I think, really the biggest difficulty when it comes to these labels. I think you've spoken to guests or you had conversations with people in the past where like we're discussing this right now, but in the practical sense, we're just too far in. Like there's no way, I mean, to do this even amongst like, it's just like, it's impossible. That's the claim.
No,
So
but
if
so
we
just
can get deeper into.
yeah, we will. But and at the end of the day, that's all a matter of perspective. Meaning, zoom out,
Yeah,
man. Yeah, like history, okay, and change takes place over hundreds of years,
that's right.
right?
Yeah, that's
Thousands,
right.
and
Just
in
planting the
terms of like
seeds. Yeah,
millions, billions, right? I honestly think we're too caught up on our own little thing. Where's the
yeah,
Abrahamic
agree.
multi-generational attitude?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, I was reminded of an Arabic expression I learned while I was studying Arabic. It's I think it's تبدأ. No, hold on. Uh, ألف ميل تبدأ بخطوة. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
Oh, okay.
So I feel like you know, I feel like we're taking those initial
I love
steps.
it.
We're planting those seeds right now.
That's one of those, mate, where
But
you didn't need to say the Arabic. It would have been fine. That's okay. You can have it. You can have it.
it's for the barakah. It's for the barakah, bro.
Oh man. All
The
right,
Arabic
cool.
language, as you know, is far superior to any other.
Oh,
So,
please. Okay. All right. Oh man. Actually, it's so
oh,
interesting
by the
because
way,
Dr. Sahib Saeed, my podcast with
yeah,
him some time back, we discussed that. There was a clip about that as well. He
mhm,
himself,
yeah,
yeah, I'm sure he doesn't see eye to eye with me on a lot of things, but I've always had a lot of respect for him, and yeah, certainly on that one, I was actually surprised positively from my perspective in terms of the kind of, I suppose, normal approach or response he has to that issue about is there an
yeah,
inherent superiority to this or that language? Again, it's just one of those where it's
yeah,
like, yeah, like the
yeah,
martial arts analogy, right?
yeah,
Same thing. Martial arts analogy.
yeah,
Yeah, it's the same idea.
right, right.
Inherent superiority to one martial art over all other martial arts, like existentially speaking. It's like,
Mhm.
if that's our starting point,
By the
and
way,
unfortunately, sadly, that's
yeah,
common, then it's very hard.
yeah. If we could just end on, if you have another 2 or 3 minutes,
Okay, cool.
if we could just end on a verse that I feel like brings together everything we've discussed today
Okay,
in this
okay.
conversation full circle.
Mm.
It came to my mind earlier, but it just we weren't able to come back to it. But Allah says towards the end of the chapter of Jonah, Surah Yunus, chapter 10, He says, قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسِ إِن كُنْتُمْ فِي شَكٍّ مِّن دِينِي فَلَا أَعْبُدُ الَّذِينَ تَعْبُدُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ وَلَكِنْ أَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ, et cetera, et cetera. So if you want to maybe, because it says, if you're in doubt about this deen,
Mm.
then know this, right? So
What's the verse number?
it's somewhere around 94, maybe.
Okay.
1094, something like that. Yeah,
Yeah, okay,
104,
I got it.
10104.
104, yeah, cool. All right, yeah. So, yeah, قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسِ, say, people, yeah, if you're in doubt, min dini, with regards to my deen, Interestingly, here Abdul Halim says religion. Mustafa Khattab, clear Quran, says my faith. Interestingly. Anyway, فَلَا أَعْبُدُ الَّذِينَ تَعْبُدُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ. So I don't serve or worship those that you serve or worship besides God. وَلَكِنْ أَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ الَّذِي يَتَوَفَّاكُمْ. But I serve God, the one يَتَوَفَّاكُم, will cause your death. وَأُمِرْتُ أَنْ أَكُونَ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And I've been commanded to be amongst the faithful of the believers. And وَأَنْ أَقِمْ وَجْهَكَ لِلدِّينِ حَنِيفًا. And that too. Now it's interesting. Again, Abdul Halim sticks with religion and set your face towards religion. I don't know.
Yeah,
like,
very awkward translation.
Yeah. Whereas Mustafa al-Khattab says, and be steadfast in faith in all uprightness, right? Lidini Hanifa, yeah? Abdul Halim as a man of pure faith, Hanif, again, Hanif here. So again, it's Abrahamic connection constantly being made. Deen, Islam, Hanif, yeah? وَلَا تَكُونَ مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. Again, as we said last time, right? They immediately to say, don't be amongst the mushrikeen, the idolaters. Again, not to pray, to call upon, meaning, لَا تَدْعُوا. Don't call on other than God, that won't benefit you or harm you. And if you do, then you'll be amongst the wrongdoers, yeah? Et cetera, et cetera. We don't need to carry on there. But I think...
Right. That's...
Yeah.
Well, one thing that's interesting, I mean, the reason I felt it was so such a powerful set of these verses, 2 or 3 verses, was because we've talked about deen. Deen is mentioned twice. Interestingly, in terms of describing this deen, it's what's not mentioned is belief but rather actions, and also then Islam is not mentioned but rather Hanif is mentioned, and it's actually pitted against mushrikeen, so it's like the opposite, right? So anyway, I just thought those points were interesting, kind of really brings full circle some of these terms we've been discussing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the right deen is ibadah, right? Like as in this case, that's what he's saying. If you're like if you want to say the definition, I don't like to use the definition of, but I'm saying like what's being related to. Okay, like if you're in doubt about my deen, then I serve God, one God. So here, let's that's the deen. So the idea of deen as ibadah, or ibadah of just Allah as the deen, right? The service or alignment with, towards or alignment with one God as the way, the orientation. Of course, I mean that's essentially what we're saying, right? Yeah. Don't know. Thank you for mentioning that one too. All right.
Yeah, of course. All right. Thank you, Iqbal. I appreciate this conversation. I hope it brings benefit it definitely brought benefit to me. It was very powerful throughout, and I hope it does the same for those watching.
Yeah. Cool. May the force be with us. All right. Take care.
You too. Peace.
Peace, man.